first of all, I just want to thank you for agreeing to meet with us.
Absolutely.
And if you could introduce your name and occupation for me?
Sure. My name is Mina, and I'm a Crisis Services Manager at the Trevor Project.
And firstly, before we get into Trevor Project, what inspired your educational focus for both your undergrad and your graduate studies?
Sure. So as an undergrad, I majored in gender studies. That wasn't really where I started. I started as a geology major, but was always really interested in gender studies and feminist studies. In high school, I was like a really voracious reader and read kind of everything I could find about LGBT stuff and gender theory and all of that, because I didn't have anybody, no community or anything like that. So I was just trying to find, any information I could find. And so I got into college and went into geology because I thought, I didn't know the practicality of gender studies. But I started really volunteering and getting involved with groups on campus that were feminist groups and like LGBT-related groups. I just really found my home there. And I also started volunteering with or an organization in the community. It was a very small town, and there were, for the high school students who were LGBT, there was no support. There was just, nothing. And so there was this one drop-in center that met once a week. And so I started volunteering there, and I started working alongside social workers and, really getting involved in that kind of one-on-one work. And decided, I was going to follow my passion, and I wasn't going to stick with rocks. And so, rocks are interesting, but they're not, for me, they're not sustaining.
Sure.
And so I decided to study gender studies, and as I was kind of, finishing up my undergrad career, I was continuing to volunteer with that program, that drop-in center, and really, wanted to continue doing that kind of work. And so went in the direction of social work. And going into it, I knew that I loved working with youth. I loved, I was really passionate about LGBT issues. Didn't quite have a focus for my social work program or degree at that point, but kind of throughout the internships that I had, I worked with adults with severe mental illnesses, and then also at a teen hotline, and really, got passionate about suicide prevention, and so that kind of brings me, through the end of that.
Yeah. Okay. And you did do advocacy work in high school as well, right? Before
I didn't. No,
okay.
Not with LGBT-related stuff anyway.
Okay.
There were no LGBT students at my high school, at all. I was not out. I was,
okay. So is that what you're talking about not having really a group?
Yeah.
Okay,
no community. Yeah.
Okay. And you found this in college. Mm-hmm. in these. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what experiences in your youth have you found that you have grown because of, and maybe comparatively with experiences that you've grown maybe despite of? Do you have anything like that?
This is, I guess, less of an experience, but less of a specific experience, but more of a kind of general experience, if you will. I'd say that family and family support has been like a really big thing for me. Unlike a lot of LGBT youth, I've been really, really lucky in the family that I have, and I've always known that they are there for me. They love me no matter what. And, that's not to say that it hasn't been a struggle. There was definitely kind of a defining moment at around, 18 or 19 when I was, I identified as transgender, and I was thinking about coming out, and was really, really afraid of what my parents would do or what they would say. And I definitely, for a moment, there was this period where I was struggling with, being suicidal, and I had this dilemma that I felt, as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, that, would my family rather that I be transgender, or would they rather that I be dead? And that was huge, right? And so, fortunately, the experiences that I'd had with my family prior to that gave me that confidence that, even if my family never spoke to me again, even if they never accepted me, that they'd rather that I be around. And so I'd say, that has been, that kind of family experience, I think, has been a really helpful thing for me. And, in the long run, it wasn't easy for my family, but they've come to be kind of the biggest supporters and biggest allies that I have. So, I think they've been awesome. In terms of what's hindered, I feel like this is a more challenging question because, I don't know, I feel like any experience that you have, even if it's a difficult experience or it kind of gets in your way, like it still helps you become the person that you become, right?
Definitely.
Well,
and it sounded like your experience is very coupling in that way, that it was both support, but also you needed to grow kind of away from like suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. So they kind of seem to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Okay. How have you seen kind of the mental health affected in youth, and maybe comparatively, have you seen mental health affected by partners or family members, like your support system and stuff?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. For LGBTQ youth specifically, because that's where my focus is, it's, I mean, every experience, that a young person has really affects their mental health in some way or another. We look at, in the suicide prevention community, kind of the ecological model of suicide, and that looks at, not only the individual and like their own experiences and their own dispositions and all of that, but also, their family relationships and the kind of larger things going on in their communities and their schools and all of that. And so yes, absolutely. I'd say like discrimination is a huge thing. Even if it seems minor, every little instance of, a young person getting bullied or getting told, that, getting called names, even if it's minor, it's just kind of one little thing that wears away at them. Another theory we like to talk about a lot in suicide prevention is Thomas Joyner's theory of suicide, and he looks at two characteristics specifically that make somebody think about killing themselves, and those are thwarted belongingness, so like the sense of not having anybody, not having a community or feeling alone, and perceived burdensomeness of feeling like you're a burden on other people. And so I'd say especially that first one, feeling alone, feeling like there's nobody around you who supports you or who gets you, or that's huge for LGBTQ youth, especially, as they're younger and perhaps they don't have a community that really understands them, or they have family that rejects them. A lot of the youth that we see, they just feel so incredibly alone, like they're the only one who's struggling with this. And the perceived burdensomeness as well, the feeling of being a burden on other people. Again, a young person who maybe is thinking about coming out to their family, for example, maybe they feel like, if I told my parents, then they'd have to, tell all the people in the family and everybody's going to hate them, and it would just be better, if I weren't around, if I weren't here. So, I'd say that we see kind of presences of both of those things in many of the youth who are...
well, and they seem to, it sounds like they go hand in hand as well, where if you start with a sense of not belonging anywhere, then the burden comes in when you do feel like anybody is around. You feel like, well, nobody else wants me around.
Absolutely.
So if you do, then I must be causing a
definitely.
problem. Okay.
Yeah.
And so before your current job for Trevor Project, you worked for an organization called Teen Line, right? How did you find yourself there after graduate school?
Actually, I was that was one of my internships in graduate school, and it was a really great opportunity, a great organization. They're an organization that they do crisis counseling, suicide prevention work, but it's all peer-to-peer, so it's all teenagers who answer the phone and talk to other teenagers, which is really incredible. And I got involved there because, I really love working with youth. I think the energy that youth have and the potential that they have are, inspiring. And so I wanted to do work directly with youth, but also wanted to do work that, not kind of one-on-one therapy type work. So that opportunity was really great, and that I got to kind of support the youth as they took the calls from other teens, and also support them in their own kind of developing processes as well. So I that was a large part of what I did, and I also did a lot of community outreach in schools for that position as well, and kind of got to go to a lot of different high schools and middle schools and talk about mental health and suicide prevention and things that they can do to take care of themselves and stuff. So
Did you ever come up with dealing with high schools? Did you ever have any issues with administration with dealing with mental health and suicidal?
Actually. So the high schools, obviously, that we went to that, invited us there, they were happy to have us, and they, loved to, especially there were some health teachers that really wanted us to come into their classrooms. But there were some instances in the year that I was there that there had been, a suicide in the school, and we really wanted to go to the school to do a postvention and, be there for the students who were grieving and hopefully prevent any additional suicides. But for some schools were very welcoming of that, but some schools, very much they did not want to talk about it. They, they felt that if we talk about mental health, we talk about suicide, it's just going to make the problem bigger. Absolutely, unfortunately.
And I'm assuming you disagree with that.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. I would too. I'm just clarifying. And how did you come to work for After Teen Line? How did you come upon Trevor Project?
Yeah, so I have known about the Trevor Project for a really long time. I guess I started learning about Trevor when I was in college, and we were doing, it was around 2010 when there was that big media attention around LGBT youth suicide. And at my college we were doing some like awareness campaigns and stuff like that. So I learned about Trevor at that point and kind of loosely followed. But as as I went through graduate school and as my focus for suicide prevention kind of became, more of a passion, I guess, I started following Trevor more, and it just kind of was fortuitous that as I was graduating, a job opening happened to open up in the crisis chat, which is also fortunate for me because I feel much more comfortable working on crisis chat than on Animal Lifeline. It's something that speaks more to me. So.
Can you explain crisis chat?
Yes, absolutely. So I think a lot of folks are familiar with lifelines where the person, calls a phone and they talk on the phone. But chat programs are a little bit newer, and they're basically a young person or any person, depending on the service. But for Trevor Chat, a young person logs on onto a computer and they chat with a trained counselor over instant messaging. So, yeah.
Okay, so there's no photos, there's no identifiable it's just anonymous.
Yeah, I mean they, at least for our service, we ask them to give some information like their name just so that we can talk with them. But it's that's kind of up to them.
Okay. And is Crisis Chat or Trevor Chat, is that exclusive to Trevor Project, or is this being adopted by other?
So our program, yes, it's exclusive to Trevor. Trevor Chat is Trevor Project's project, right. But there are other crisis chat lines, that other suicide prevention centers run.
Discerning between. So Trevor Chat is just Trevor Project's version of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is a typical day at Trevor Project for your position? What does that look like for you?
Sure. Well, a typical day in crisis services looks really different every day. So,
that would make sense.
So I work with staff in the digital crisis services. There's about seven of us working in digital crisis services, and that's Trevor Chat, Trevor Text, and Trevor Space, which is our social networking site. And most of us work on Trevor Chat and Trevor Text. And so we also work with about 200 plus volunteers all across the country. And so a large part of what we do is training volunteers to take chats from the youth and supporting those volunteers as they take those chats. So all of the chats, they're taken not by the staff, they're taken by these volunteers really everywhere across the country. And so a typical day might include, each volunteer goes through a 40-hour training, and those trainings are broken up into segments of about 4 hours long. And so a typical day might include 4 hours of training where we might train the volunteers on assessing for suicide risk, or communicating empathically through chat communication, or recognizing signs of abuse. And also we do live role plays with the trainees as well, so that they feel really equipped and comfortable taking chats from the youth once they actually start. The rest of the day might be spent, there's always one staff person, that might be me or somebody else, who supervises the counselors who are actually taking the chats, and provides them that live support, as they're dealing with this tough work. Because, for me, this is my job, and I'm used to doing this work, but for some of our volunteers, they do it for 2 hours a week, and it can be really intense.
Yeah.
So we really try to provide them that kind of support, and that, especially in those really, really tough situations.
Do you provide care or mental care or counselors at your work for those volunteers and stuff like that?
Yeah, we actually do. We have monthly counselor support groups that meet, that I run about once a month. We run 2 groups, and counselors, they can come or they cannot come, but they, often will come with specific issues they have in mind that have been troubling them over chats, or, how do I deal with, when I start to get really emotional during a chat, or how do I deal with, a visitor who's, not responding in a way that, that is very elaborative or something like that. And so we have those periodically, and then they also, they know that they can reach out to, any of us at any time. My boss is also, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and then I'm a social worker, so we've got enough kind of clinical support on staff.
Nice.
So yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
How did the service, the Trevor Chat, come about? You said it's newer, so how was this kind of suggested or implemented?
Yeah, so it started about 4 years ago, actually, and it was before I came on. But the Trevor Project, like, we really believe in kind of meeting youth where they're at and where they're most comfortable. Because, I mean, honestly, for a youth-focused organization to not kind of keep up with advances in technology and advances in, like, what are youth doing these days, that would be irresponsible. Sure. So about 4 years ago, Trevor Chat started, and the idea behind that was that youth are, they're much, even in everyday conversation, they're much less likely to pick up a phone and call their friend and talk to them. They want to chat, they want to text. And so, with suicide and with crisis, it's probably even more of a barrier. Like, imagine, a young person who is really suicidal, or they're really struggling with some sort of crisis, and the barrier of picking up a phone, dialing a number, waiting for the phone to ring, and then hearing somebody else's voice on the phone, that can be really, really intense and really scary, especially for a youth who's just not used to talking on the phone.
Yeah, definitely.
So we find that actually chat is kind of a lower barrier for entry. It's a little bit less scary. And we also find that we have kind of different populations that use our Lifeline service and our chat service. We have, our chat service tends to be used by slightly younger youth, and also the more youth who identify as female, more youth who identify as transgender, whereas the Lifeline tends to be slightly older and more youth who identify as male. So yeah, that's interesting as well. But
it is.
Yeah.
How have you seen this service in particular help your outreach? So you talk about these kind of like maybe statistical differences, but has there been an increase in people that have contacted Trevor Project?
Yeah, there has been. Our Lifeline has seen a steady uptick of calls. So the implementation of chat has not decreased from the number of youth who are calling the Lifeline, but our chat program has just continued to grow and grow and grow. It's just been in the last year that we've been running 7 days a week, but just in the last year, our volume of chat visitors has grown like 50%. So, and we're expecting it to continue to grow. Yeah, I think we're reaching more youth who, they might have needed help before, but they might not have been willing or able to call on the phone. So yeah, I think offering a variety of services is helpful in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And you just had the biggest event of your year, I think, earlier this week, right? Trevor Project Live. Right? Can you explain what that event is and what it hopes to gain?
Sure. Yeah. So Trevor Live is actually we hold it twice a year, and once in LA and once in New York. And so on Monday we had Trevor Live in New York. And Trevor Live is basically, it's the biggest fundraising event for the Trevor Project annually. And so the goal of it is to raise money to help support Trevor and help support the work that we do, so that we can continue to reach out to the youth in various mediums. I wasn't at this year's Trevor Live, but from what I hear, it was very successful. I think it was hosted by Wanda Sykes and was produced by Adam Shankman, so some big names. And we've been getting a lot of positive feedback about it. We raised more money than we expected, so yeah, it's been a successful event this year. Yeah.
If you were to consider yourself a Pathfinder, what would you consider yourself a Pathfinder of?
I would say a Pathfinder of authenticity. I think, especially doing the work that I do and seeing the stories of so many of the youth who I work with, indirectly or directly, so many of these young people are really they're struggling for authenticity, and they're really trying to live their lives in like the most true manner that they can, but they face so many barriers every day of people telling them, that's not who you are, that you can't be like that. And yet they continue to struggle, and I relate to that personally. I know that I've been through similar struggles, and so that's, I think, what I want to be a Pathfinder for, is helping people to feel that they are able to live authentically.
Beautiful. I think that's wonderful. Awesome. Well, that's all we have.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. How did you all get involved with it? How did you start this?
That's your story.
Well, it's funny. I'm sure the reason